Welcome to It's All in Your Head podcast. This is episode 5, Healthy versus Unhealthy Relationships. I'm Michelle Walker, and I'm here with Tarra Ray. So, Tarra, we've talked about how, as the pandemic happened, some of the things that we saw happening for people is they were in each other's presence a lot more than they wanted to be sometimes. And their love relationships either got better or worse. Wouldn't you say that that's true?
That is very true. Very
Yeah,
true.
and I had a couple of situations where affairs that were happening came to light, and that was not fun. And one client in particular who was having an affair, couldn't follow through with that whole situation. And actually, I was kind of proud of him. He decided to stop the affair because realized that you know, he preferred his wife, which I thought was great, and was able to kind of just stop that thing. And, um, some other things that I think have been in some ways really good. Some relationships that probably should have ended did.
Yes.
What are you seeing?
The exact same thing, because you get the opportunity to see that person day in and day out. And a lot of people have reassessed their relationship in totality, whether or not they even should be together, like what you said, or if they were on the fence about making a decision. They've made those decisions now and been very clear. Those that wanted to stay together have stayed, and there are many people who have separated, but it was probably that they needed to separate.
Mhm. So if I were to say what defines in a broad sense like a healthy versus an unhealthy relationship, I'm going to just kind of throw a couple things out there and you can tell me what you think about this. But one of the things I think is healthy versus unhealthy is if a person feels like they have to change their spouse, I think we're in trouble right there. If
Absolutely.
you're in a relationship feeling like you need to change your spouse, how would you feel being in a relationship with someone who feels like they need to change you? That
That
would feel uncomfortable.
definitely, that's too much pressure, number one. But it brings to mind something that I talk about a lot, and people's motivation for getting into relationships. Because sometimes people have a dream or a goal for their life. Like you think about those cutouts on beaches where you can go and just put your face in there, but the family's already kind of there and formed. That's what a lot of people do with their lives. And all they're doing is taking someone and trying to fit their face into what they already have set out as the mold. And if that is what you're experiencing, then I think, yeah, that puts you in a definitely difficult spot.
Yeah, and I see that when people, especially people who have some abandonment issues, they'll find somebody and fall in love, and maybe that person doesn't fit with them, or there's some really big red flags, but they're going to change that person into what they want rather than let go and find the person that really honestly fits more of what they need.
Mhm.
And so that's where you run into trouble of trying to change someone into who I want rather than going out and really finding what it is that I truly need in my life. And that would be the healthy versus unhealthy in my mind. What would you define it?
I think the same way, but also looking very deeply into your motivation for getting into the relationship. And so I don't ever mind telling my story. Most people who know me know I've been divorced twice. I was actually divorced 2 times before I turned 30. And each time that I got married, it was for very different reasons. And I don't know that love in the first two relationships had anything to do with it. Even though I loved the person, that had nothing to do with what motivated me to get into a relationship with them or to marry them.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've been married several times too, but mine had more to do with mental health issues. And so, and I had abandonment issues too. I think that I would find somebody, and in order to not feel abandoned, I would try to change that person into being the right person. And so that's definitely the unhealthy part. So I remember being at a point in my life wondering why I couldn't keep these relationships together. And I went back to school, got my master's degree, became a counselor. And then the very first job that I had, I was asked to give couples workshops by Dr. John Gottman. Now, we've talked about Dr. Gottman. The reason why he is the person that most therapists refer to for couples information is because he's the only researcher that actually researched couples. And he did it for many years because he kept getting a grant to research couples at the University of Washington. So he just kept doing the research. He never really put his research out there other than to the professional community. And it never really was used much for a long time. It wasn't until he and his wife actually put the research out there in a book called 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work that his research started to get some traction.
Principle 1. Enhance your love maps. Happy couples are familiar with each other's world. They have a love map of one another. They know all the details about their partner's life. They know each other's favourite TV show, what their current goals are, and what stresses them out. Without a love map, you can't really know your spouse, and if you don't really know someone, how can you truly love them? To enhance your love maps, find out what you don't know about your partner by asking questions. Here are some examples. Who are your partner's best friends? Who are the relatives your partner likes the least? What is your partner's basic life philosophy? And are you familiar with your partner's hopes and aspirations? It can be easy to lose sight of your love maps amongst the events in life that require your attention, such as work, family issues, and other things. But for a healthy relationship, it is essential that you know each other's love maps. Principle 2. Nurture your fondness and admiration. This is perhaps the most important principle of all, so pay attention. To nurture your fondness and admiration for each other is to have a positive view of each other. A couple can find out their current level of fondness and admiration by seeing how they view their past. If they view it in a positive light, then they are likely to have a bright future. If they view it in a negative light, then they are in trouble. To nurture your fondness and admiration, Gottman stresses that appreciation is essential. Write down 3 or more of your partner's positive characteristics along with an incident that illustrates each quality. Then read your list to each other. For example, if your partner did something as simple as doing the dishes instead of you, show your appreciation by thanking them for their kindness. The third principle is to turn toward each other instead of away. It's the little things that count. To be a happy couple, turn toward each other by showing you care. You can do this through small acts of giving your partner your full attention. Play a board game together, shop for groceries, or call each other during the day. These small acts are the basis of connection and passion. When stress and conflict comes in the way of happy couples, they will have more positivity in what Gottman calls their emotional bank accounts, which will help alleviate their conflicts. Principle 4. Let your partner influence you. Happy couples work as a team and consider each other's feelings and perspectives. They listen to each other and make decisions together by searching out common ground. Gottman identified that men are more likely than women to ignore their partner's perspective when tackling problems together. They exert too much power and must be open to being influenced by their partner's perspective if they are to improve their relationship. It's not always the men though, the same message applies to women as well. For example, if you want to spend $10,000 on a new car and your partner wants to spend it on a holiday, then take a deep breath and listen to each other. Show empathy, don't criticize, and really think about your partner's viewpoint. Principle 5. Solve your solvable problems. Gottman identifies 2 types of problems in relationships: solvable problems and perpetual problems. It can be hard to tell the difference, but one way to tell is that solvable problems seem less intense and gut-wrenching than perpetual ones. Solvable problems are situational and there's no underlying conflict. An example of a solvable problem is: Bill and Sally agree that it's Bill's job to take out the trash every evening after dinner. Lately he's been distracted from work obligations and so he forgets. Sally ends up taking it out herself, or the trash just sits there. In the morning the apartment smells horrible and so Sally is angry. This is a solvable problem. He's simply under a lot of stress at work, and it has nothing to do with the underlying relationship issues. One possible solution is to put a sign on the fridge door as a reminder to take out the trash. Problem solved. Here are 5 steps to solve a solvable problem. Number 1. Soften your startup. When bringing up an issue, be calm, kind, and don't criticize. Number 2. Make and receive repair attempts. When the argument is getting out of hand, let your partner know and suggest taking a break. 3. Soothe yourself and each other. On your break, go for a walk, listen to some music, read, or meditate. 4. Compromise. Share and consider each other's viewpoints to come up with a solution that works for both of you. 5. Be tolerant of each other's faults. If there are incidents in the past that come up in arguments, identify them, discuss them, and apologize where necessary. So what about perpetual problems? Well, here's an example of one. Susan wants to spend less time with Jim and more time with her friends. Jim says it makes him feel lonely. Susan says she needs time away from him. Jim seems needy to her and she's feeling suffocated by him. This is a perpetual problem. There is a core difference in their personalities and what they need from each other to feel connected. The difference is unlikely to change, so they will have to be willing to accept and adapt to it if they want their relationship to thrive. Principle 6. Overcome gridlock. Gridlock is the result of perpetual disagreements where both partners have entirely different beliefs, dreams, or personalities. Josie wants to have children, Harry doesn't. Ben wants Sally to go to church with him, but Sally is an atheist. Gottman claims these issues are unlikely to be solved, but you can learn to accept and adapt to your differences. Identify and respect each other's dreams and beliefs. You don't have to agree with them, but acknowledge, listen, and show respect to what your partner has to say. Come up with a temporary compromise and thank each other for sharing. The last principle is to create shared meaning. Shared meaning will enhance your marriage by bringing you together. Here are 2 ways you can create shared meaning. 1. Create rituals of connection. This could be anything that brings you together that you do on a regular basis, such as sharing a morning routine, celebrating Easter each year by going out as a family, or eating out together once a week. And number 2, work towards a common goal such as helping the community through volunteer work or building a houseboat. And now you don't have to go building a houseboat, but it can be any goal that you both agree on that involves both of you.
But I had to give his information to groups of couples, and I remember as I was looking through the information, and he'd watch some videos and he would be talking about what works and what doesn't, and I was thinking to myself, no wonder my relationships don't work. Right there on the D. But it was great eye-opening information because I gave those workshops twice a week for almost 3 years, and then I met my husband, and so I had all the information by the time I met my husband. I just hadn't ever had anybody to practice it on until I met him.
So,
but go ahead.
I was going to ask you, so tell me through Dr. Gottman's work, because I know like this is technical, but still through his work, what do you think were some of the most important principles to help you go from that unhealthy type of attaching in relationships to a more healthy attachment?
I think probably what I didn't understand is that there are definite rules in relationships, things you absolutely just don't do. And if you want your relationship to stay together, he talks about what he calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And it's a Bible reference that in the last days there's going to be 4 horsemen coming out of the 4 corners of the earth before the apocalypse of the earth, right? Mm-hmm. And so the 4 things are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Mm-hmm. So if I could get a little more specific for you on that one. criticism creates defensiveness. So it becomes this cycle where one person criticizes and the other one defends. So it goes around and around in a circle. And then contempt is where one person feels like their view of the world is superior to the other person's. In other words, my opinion of things is superior to your opinion of things, right? And usually, he says, it's accompanied by an eye roll. So one person is rolling their eyes at the other person's opinion, right?
Mhm.
And then stonewalling is the fourth one, and that's where people they turn away from trying to talk their things out. Instead of talking things out, one person will turn away. They'll stonewall.
Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications, like, share, and comment.
Stonewall. So he talks about the ways to get through that. He has antidotes. He calls it an antidote to these things. And the antidote to criticism is to express what you need without using the word you. So instead of like saying, to my husband, you leave your stuff all over the place, I could say something like, I feel uncomfortable when I see things left here or here, And instead of, if somebody criticizes me, instead of getting defensive, I could just own a small part of what is being said.
Mhm.
Like Serge says to me, you leave your dishes in the sink. I could say, yeah, sometimes I do. So just own a small part of it. Yeah, sometimes I do that,
Mhm.
And then contempt often has an air of superiority about it. And it's important to remember that there's no right or wrong view of the world. It's just two different people's view of the world. And that we have to respect that I might see the world differently than Serge sees the world, but his view and my view are not superior to each other. They're just different, That's a really tough one, I think, for couples. I see that a lot, where one person says, well, the right way is this. Well, it isn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or what you need to do
Yeah.
is,
What you need to
or
do.
if
And
it was me, I would. I think all of that sounds the same.
it does. It all sounds superior, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to help couples understand that. And then the stonewalling thing is often about heart rate. He says it's about when a person's heart rate gets above a certain beat per minute, that really our bodies shut down. And he says to use time out to get our bodies to calm down, that we really need to exit a conversation. But because people feel abandoned when someone walks out of a conversation, he says to really be careful to come back in about 20 minutes. And he says at least 20 minutes away is important. It takes that long for the body to calm down, that you come back and decide whether to keep discussing the issue or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was the most important part for me. In fact, anytime I was tempted to say something mean, I would just imagine this little balloon shaped like a 90, like 90, flapping in the wind, because 90% of relationships will end if any of those four things are present in the communication style. So I would just imagine this little 90 flapping in the breeze. Anytime I was tempted to say something mean.
I know when I'm talking to couples a lot, I talk about, just making sure that you can build yourself up, because, mostly when I'm dealing in relationships, I'm talking to women, and it's typically women who have not taken very good care of themselves and don't know where to start in that process. So that's usually where we start, talking about making yourself the most important part of the equation, or something I call eating the big piece of chicken. Because we're always taught as women, we come last. Your children come first, your husband comes first, and then you get what's left over. And I kind of turn that upside down and say you get yours first, because that teaches you to take care of yourself and put yourself first in these processes. Because if you are taken care of as the woman, the mom, the wife in the situation, that more than likely And really, I say 100% of the time, the people who are connected to you are also taken care of. So it's not selfish to take care of yourself, especially in relationships. And again, we go into relationships with different motivation. We should start talking about why we're getting into this thing. That's very important. I talk about communicating, very important, but it's not always the principal thing. It's how you communicate. Because sometimes we think the abundance of words is communication. It is not. It just means that you might have a better grasp of the English language than your partner or something like that. It doesn't mean that because you can use a lot of words, you're a better communicator.
No, in fact, lecturing is not a communication style. It actually just shuts the other person down.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I say things like, know the power of your no. We know what no means. No means no. And also in relationship, we know the power of your okay. And I almost mean that like the sarcastic okay, like, okay. It just means that it doesn't necessarily mean I agree with you right now, but it means for the sake of peace, I'm going to let you have that, is what I say. Because sometimes when the emotions are high, you need that out. And just say, okay. And it hopefully can diffuse the situation long enough for you to get your thoughts together or to allow your partner to get their thoughts together so you can come back and have a more productive conversation about it. When I feel myself getting to the okay, that means that I'm at that point where you say, well, you think you're going to say something mean, you just leave it alone. It's like, okay.
Right.
Because
That's
peace
the
is
beautiful
more important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because and that's important because Dr. Gottman found that the majority of your issues can't be resolved. He found it was 69% of them can't be resolved. It's basic personality differences. So if you think about the 31% that can be resolved, that's not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we spend, those of us in a good, healthy marriage spend a lot of our time enhancing the parts that do work, which is only 31%, and then very delicately and respectfully dancing around the other 69% that don't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the art and balance of it, is how do I respectfully dance around the parts that don't. And I was thinking about this the other day because it's things like this, like in order to keep the peace, we have these subtle little hints and things that I think couples do. Like, for instance, I'm really terrible about putting my dishes in the dishwasher. I mean, we've been married for over 11 years and together for 13, and I still am bad about putting my dishes in the dishwasher. But hold on a sec. And so what will happen is Serge just kind of gently leaves the dishwasher open. you know, like we'll be in the kitchen and he'll just kind of open the dishwasher, and that's his hint that the dishwasher's here. And it does remind me that I can just put my dishes right in the dishwasher. And he does stuff like that rather than start an argument. He just hints. And I know that if I give him a bunch of stuff that I need done, that maybe one or two of it is going to get done, and there are several that won't, and I'll have to remind him over and over and over again. And it's frustrating, but that's how it is, and that's how it has always been, and I just know that's how it is. But there are other things, such as the fact that he has an amazing sense of humor, and I literally laugh out loud every day of my life. And being able to laugh out loud every day of your life has value.
Absolutely.
And so you just take the things that have value and you, as gently as possible, dance around the things that are a little irritating. And that's what a good relationship is, recognizing that those things will get slightly better over time, but they're never going to completely resolve. you know. And that's the nature of a good relationship versus an unhealthy one. In an unhealthy one, there's way too much focus on the things that don't work. And there's an unrealistic expectation that this other person should be exactly who I think they should be. And they should be it on my time frame, not, not theirs, right? Would you say that's a good explanation of it?
It is, because I often say this, and especially from the spiritual side of things too, I say that the hardest thing God has ever commanded us to do is for two people to become one. Because that's what marriage is described like in the Bible. But the other thing that I say is my marriage got better when I stopped trying to make David be what I wanted him to be and just let him be what God wanted him to be. I don't have a choice over who he is. That is his choice. Sometimes it's hard in the moment to keep that as the focus, but that is the reality. He gets to be who it is God has commissioned him to be. And it has nothing to do with who it is I want him to be, if that makes sense.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about, where we keep trying to turn somebody on my time frame into who I want them to be. And that becomes unhealthy. And you see people argue and fight over that thing, when in reality, if you just took that little 31% of resolvable issues and enhanced it and enhanced it and enhanced it and made it everything, you could just enjoy it. It's never going to get better than that. According to Dr. Gottman's research, you're never going to be more compatible than that with anybody on the planet. And that's because there are too many variables. Even two people growing up in the same home don't experience the same things the same way. And we all develop our personalities in such a different way that you're never going to be more compatible with anybody in that way. So you're always going to be unhappy if you're going to look for the differences, So look for those similarities, and that's what creates the healthiness. And so, but there are ways to come closer together with those things that don't work. And that was the coolness, I think, that helped me a lot, was finding out through Dr. Gottman's research that if you talk about meaning instead of about issues, that you get closer to a resolution. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're talking about money, with Dr. Gottman in his videos, he has example there, a couple's talking about money and they're fighting about money. And the deal is that he takes all their extra money and he goes and he spends it on skydiving and paragliding and rock climbing, all kinds of adventures, right? And she takes all their extra money when she gets a hold of it and she hides it in an account without his name on it. So they come into the office and they are fighting about money. According to Dr. Gottman, this has nothing to do with money. It has to do with what money means to each person. So he talks to the man and he says, what does money mean to you? And he says, well, money means that I have the freedom to experience as many things as I want to. Well, now he has to find out why that's important. So he has to ask him about his history. Okay, so what is your history with that? Why do you need to experience as many things as you can? And he says, well, when I was 16, I got in a car accident and I almost died. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would experience as much of life as I could because I never knew when it would end. And it made me feel like I had to experience as much as I could of life. So that was his history and his meaning. So then he asks her, what does money mean to you? And she says, money means security. It means that I'll never have people taking care of me. I'll always be able to take care of myself. Well, what's your history with that? And she says, well, my parents are in their 70s and they still have to work, and all of their kids have to give them money, and I am never going to be like that. And that's her meaning and her history, right? So you can see how these two people, it's not about money that they're fighting about their meaning. And so if you can talk about meaning together, each person begins to understand the other a little bit better. And he says that over time, the two of them talking about that meaning of money, they were able to find a compromise over time that both could live with. And so that was important to me, because the differences that I have with my husband, when we talk about what it means to each of us, we can find a different kind of compromise.
Mhm.
So that's been really helpful too.
I call that finding the theme.
The
So
theme, yeah.
theme. We might think it's a particular issue, but as we look deep into it, it's not an issue so much as what that issue means to that person. So that's what I'm always encouraging people. Okay, yes, you told me that upset you. What is the theme? What's the underlying meaning? What triggered you about what was said or what happened? And then also talking to people about impact versus intent is very important. Your intention may not have been to do something that was an affront to your partner, but the impact was that's actually what happened. Or I'll say, if you step on my toe and I say, ouch, you cannot look at me and tell me that did not hurt. You've got to accept from me my experience based on what happened.
I love that. I love that. I hadn't even thought of that myself. To have each person own how your behavior has impacted me,
Mm-hmm.
even though that wasn't your intent.
Mm-hmm. Hello, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us for It's All in Your Head podcast. This is episode 5, and we are talking about healthy versus unhealthy relationships. Mishele and I both have experience. Maybe we'll get into our experiences more, maybe we won't. I'm loving talking about the science, so maybe that's even more beneficial for us at this point. But also, we have to talk about key components that should definitely be in marriages and in relationships. I know some people are offended, but when I'm doing couples counseling and I'm talking to my clients, we are always talking about the need for having a healthy sex life in our relationships. So I just want to put that out there, and let's jump into it. A lot of times when people are having struggles in their relationship, the first thing to go is the sex life. So I encourage people in relationships to make sure they are having sex. It's very important to your relationship. It has all kinds of really psychological and physical benefits. So, Mishele, when I say that, what do you think about?
No, I absolutely agree with you. Intimacy is extremely important, and it's a question I always ask people: how is your intimacy? And if they start telling me, well, we're not being intimate, that just like you, I tell them, then let's fix that. What can we do to fix that? And just jumping into it is sometimes a fix.
Because people get uncomfortable and they're like, oh my gosh, my therapist said we should be having sex. Yes, your therapist said you should be having sex. And it's still taboo and maybe not the good girl conversation in people's minds, but it's so important that we do discuss that, because it's part of life. It's a reality. And many people start this grass is greener on the other side thing. No, old people used to say it's a snake in every garden. So we want to make sure that we're encouraging people to fix what they have, or try to fix it if it's fixable, before they jump to go and try and do something else. Another thing that I think about is commitment. Most times relationships, and I heard a pastor say this, the thing that makes people stay married 50, 60, 70 years is not so much, oh, the love that they have and all of these different things. It's their commitment to the process. If you can be committed to the process of marriage and continuing to have a healthy marriage or a healthy relationship, you can make it work. I am team marriage, I'm team relationship, I'm team love, always. Even though I've been divorced a couple times, I am team love, team marriage, team healthy relationship. And I say all the time, it's time out for people to be giving up their relationships. If you have to, I understand, but usually I'm always erring on the side of, if you can make it work, let's talk about the things you can put in place to make it work.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I think the happiest that I've been has been in my long-term committed relationship and knowing how to keep it that way in a good, healthy way. And what's helped me to keep it that way has been knowing that there are things that I can do to keep it healthy. Because, like you said, it can't stay committed and if it's not healthy, because unhealthy things just automatically end. And
Mhm.
so if we can keep it healthy and long-term and committed, and what keeps it that way is sometimes people have to do these touch-ups. You know, there are periods in a relationship that need touch-ups. Somewhere between about 7 and 10 years, people find that they do a readjustment. And somewhere again, when kids are teenagers, marriages go through these really unhappy times when your kids are teenagers. So somewhere between about 20 years and 25 years into a marriage, sometimes they can get really unhappy, and people will go back to counseling and do some readjusting. And then again, when kids leave home, sometimes marriages can do some readjusting then too. And so it's not uncommon for people to go and have counseling and readjust and kind of rework things at times. It's okay. Just let it happen, you know, just do some readjusting.
And I think that's important because when you have two people who might likely not agree, you should have someone else that you can go to kind of help be the deciding factor. I always tell people, especially Christian people, when we're doing Christian counseling as it relates to marriage, that the word of God has to be the deciding factor. It should never be two people left to their own devices because it's not going to work. You don't have someone who can come in and be that deciding voice for you. You've got to include someone else. Not that you tell everybody all the ins and outs and all the things in your relationship, because you still want to help to cover your partner. There's a scripture in the Bible that I love that says, love covers a multitude of sins, and in some versions of the Bible, or faults. And if you love your partner, you naturally want to cover those things for them. Not to a point where it's unhealthy, but to a point where you allow them kind of that cocoon to grow or that soft place to land when they're having difficulty. And I'll say this all the time. If you can be naked in front of a person, you can be vulnerable with that person. Most people are, I'm not vulnerable. No, you should be able to do that. That should be part of the process so that you know you have that soft place to land with inside of your marriage and with your partner.
I never thought about that before. So if you can be physically naked, you can be emotionally naked with them too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes we get that backwards. It's like, no, you can definitely. You should make sure. I wouldn't feel comfortable if I couldn't feel comfortable with you handling my emotions. I shouldn't feel comfortable with you handling my body.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it. There's an someone then negative, then we can kind of screw up with them every now and then, and it's absorbed by this good positive feeling that we have. So in other words, we have a little bit of a cushion of positivity, right? But if we pick out more of the negative with someone than the positive, then the opposite happens. Then all of the negative things kind of get over enhanced, right?
Mhm.
And so we create what Dr. Gottman calls the positive regard in our relationships by being more positive than negative. In fact, a 5-to-1 ratio is what he felt. I mean, of course, he's a scientist, so he's going to study it that way. But just being more positive than negative. And that way it's easier to be vulnerable, and we can kind of screw up every now and then, and it'll still be absorbed by the positivity.
Thank you again for joining us for episode 5 of It's All in Your Head podcast. And remember,
Mental health matters.
and if you don't deal with your stuff, it's going to deal with you. Bye-bye, everyone.